of brain fog and shit and fatigue to actually get to this point. Apparently, the medication that I am on now for weight loss, one of the side effects of that is actually that I just do not get the same amount of energy that I normally get for at least a few weeks while the body adjusts to it. That's fine. As somebody that has to put out content for not one, but 3 channels, I can definitely afford to be fatigued all the time. That's something that I can manage. But then again, I also can't afford any of the problems that come with being overweight, so at least 5 days in the gym, and that's my plan. Anyway, guys, I need to run an idea by you real quick, and it's some of the language that we use on the left, and it's don't get me wrong, it's accurate language. It is accurate language, and it's language that I personally am a-okay with using. I'm going to throw that right down before anybody has anything that they would like to say about, me. What, you're turning liberal? Like, no, I'm not. Man, my brain's jumbled. Let me unjumble my brain real quick. So the thesis that I'm going for this is that there are some words that we use that kind of turn the brains off of conservatives. It kind of like trigger words that immediately put them into defensive mode. But that's not all. It's also that some of these words aren't wholly accurate the way that we would like them to be, or at least in a way that is easily understandable. So, like, if I use the word Nazi, and you're on the left, then I am likely using the term, or at least you would probably assume I'm using the term, to describe somebody who is generally very, very racist, very nationalistic, maybe even pro-eugenics. That kind of person is who I'm describing, because, like, those are policies of the Nazi Party. But if I use that term to describe somebody and somebody on the right hears that term, they're immediately going to shut their brain off and go, that liberal just says that anybody he doesn't like is a Nazi. And, there are people I've seen on the internet that 100% do that unironically, and that's a frustrating thing because it's a very, very loud minority of people on the left that do that. But the thing is that if you're on the internet, you get that loud people. You get the loud people before you get anything else, and that's just agitating. But there's another word that I want to talk about, and that word is fascist. So I've been doing some thinking and I've been doing some digging, and it turns out that not all experts agree that the current United States regime is fascist. Now, most experts on the subject of fascism and history and totalitarian regimes do agree on a particular word that describes the United States, and that word may actually be more accurate on the whole, and actually a lot more sinister as well. So, let me explain. In Nazi Germany and in Italy, we'll talk about these places first. In Italy, Benito Mussolini demanded power from the government, and that power was, given to him after he forced their hand. Like, I say given to them, but like, imagine if January 6th had worked. That would be what happened there. Hitler, on the other hand, got elected as the Nazis gained more influence as a party after several losses, and after he had spent time in jail for trying to take over the government before. And when he got elected, within a short amount of time, a state of emergency was enacted such that he could get emergency powers and dissolve democracy in Germany. Now, anybody who wants to make a regime that will not get attacked by a whole bunch of other people the way that the Nazis did would learn a couple of lessons, right? From both Benito Mussolini's fascist movement and the Nazi movement, which was also fascist by description. They would learn not to blatantly attack a ton of people around them without, they wouldn't engage in imperialism. At least not in a way that they could not manufacture consent for, both here and abroad. And the United States has most certainly been doing that. We tend to destabilize other regimes instead of blatantly just taking them over. Our particular imperialist project is a little more weird. Anselin says, yep, and how long is the video giving an accurate definition going to be? And then the difference between the definition of the common understanding. Yeah, there's all kinds of weird shit. Anyway, the reason that I bring that up is anybody who looked at what Hitler and Mussolini did and aspires to the same level of power that they had, the same level of power and control, but if they did not want to have the side effects that came with having that kind of power that could be wrested from you because you're doing all of the violence, what would they do? Well, they would be a lot more subtle, and they would use a concept that I've been seeing crop up a little bit called illiberal democracy. Now, when I'm using the word liberal, I'm not using it to mean the, vaguely neo-capitalist politics that is okay with progressive change when it comes to social things, but also doesn't support any of the financial programs that could underpin those, so it ends up being self-defeating. That's kind of one of my big criticisms where liberalism is concerned usually, but we're not using liberal that way. Okay, Badass Dark Lord, thank you for the follow. We're using liberal more in the vague sense of, person who likes freedom. So, an illiberal democracy is a democracy in name where the reins of democracy are used to erode freedoms, even freedoms of voting, even freedoms of participation in various forms of government, where the ability to erode those freedoms is utilized, but outright power is not seized. So take a look at what's going on with Trump right now, as an example. Would I say he's a fascist? Yes, I would. Anybody that wants to live... Axo says, so kind of a step to fascism? No, that's the thing. That's the reason that I want to bring this up and talk to you guys about it, because here's the thing. I believe that Trump is a fascist. Donald J. Trump himself, and I've done more than one video taking actual things he's done and lining them up with Umberto Eco's idea of fascism to say that, yes, Donald Trump himself is a fascist, but much like how if Bernie Sanders was the president of the United States, we would not suddenly be socialist, Donald Trump being president of the United States does not suddenly make us fascist. What is an illiberal democracy by comparison? Because, Trump is a fascist, but again, just having the guy with that ideology in charge does not suddenly make the entire country fascist, because we are supposed to have these cool things called checks and balances. Supposed to. An illiberal democracy is a governing system that holds elections, but it lacks a lot of the liberal institutions like an independent judiciary, a free press, and of course minority rights that are needed to guarantee the individual liberties that, liberalism tends to argue for. But liberalism broadly, again, not the strict liberal political definition. We're using vague terms instead of specific terms. So, why would a country choose to go this route instead of the fascist route? Well, the fascist route has been done and failed. The illiberal democracy, on the other hand, looks like it's just a metamorphization of the current liberal project that we have in the United States. It just looks like our republic doing what our republic does, just kind of changing ever so slightly. It's exactly what has been happening as well, by the way. The independent judiciary, I hate to tell you guys, but our judiciary system is completely bought and paid for in the Supreme Court sense. We don't have the numbers that will not side with Trump. So when you have that majority system in the judiciary, like what we have right now, where Trump can get damn near anything passed through, that check and balance doesn't exist anymore. Congress, that might be a check and balance that we get here in a bit, but it's not like voter rights aren't a thing that is actively trying to be eroded in the United States. Literally, the right for a bunch of people to fucking drive in Kansas was rescinded, and you know that if an invalid ID, quote, quote, is shown during voting, that they're gonna kick you out of the voting booth too. So an illiberal democracy still has elections, it still has Congress, the judicial system, it still has the balance of power, but so much of that power, real wieldable power, is in the hand of the executive that it doesn't matter. Now, when you have fascism, like actual, like manifested fascism, then you don't have any of those institutions either, but you don't have the veneer at all. You don't have any of that at all. You just have the supreme leader, and what the supreme leader says is what happens, period. Whereas it looks, and the news can tell us that, oh, there's people who are fighting against Trump from within the White House, or from within the executive branch, or from within the judicial branch, or from within Congress. But the reality is, what he says tends to go more often than not. He can get us to war with Iran without congressional approval. That check and balance doesn't exist. He can do a lot of fucking things without congressional approval. So, while I can say that, yes, Donald Trump is a fascist, easily, that's not hard at all, and that's easy to prove. Again, I've got videos for that specifically. If we want to talk about the Trump regime, and we want to be convincing, it might actually be more accurate and more convincing to start using the term illiberal democracy. Because, again, an illiberal democracy would look exactly like what our country does right now. It looks 100% like what our country does right now, and it is really hard to get a conservative not to agree with that fact if they are somebody that thought that Donald Trump won the presidential race of 2020, because at that point, they also believe that these systems can be rigged to a certain person's favor, and at that point, you're taking at least the steps to an illiberal democracy. So, yeah, no, like the whole point of an illiberal democracy is that it is able to hide the fact that it is not actually democratic behind a formal veneer of democracy, democratic institutions, democratic procedures. There's no real universal definition of what an illiberal democracy is, but based on what I've described to you, I feel like these are kind of accurate. If you want other terms, maybe you could get like electoral authoritarianism or soft authoritarianism, because again, we know that Donald Trump wants to run the United States like a business, and what is that if not an authoritarian bent? Because when you're the head honcho, you don't really answer to that many fucking people. And the thing that I worry about, though, is that despite the fact that this term is more accurate than fascism, it feels like it is a softer word, but it's not really a softer word, because when we use the term fascist, we are usually talking about an authoritarian who has supreme power at a minimum. Like, there's a lot more that is going on with fascism, obviously. Again, Umberto Eco has a wonderful essay on all of the different aspects for fascism, but sitting down with somebody and trying to explain that doesn't really work. Most people don't want to fucking listen to that. But, again, is the term more accurate? I think so. I think it is, personally. Old Gus says, I mean, there's also the fact that we literally have a party that uses liberal as a slur. I mean, yeah, there is that. Jassa says, all I hear are liberal reps saying the MAGA reps. It scrolled as I was reading that. All I hear are liberal reps saying that the MAGA reps confide in them, that they agree, but are just scared of Dementia Dawn. But see, like, that's the thing. That's kind of something that happened in Hitler's party as well. There were plenty of people that thought that Hitler was the guy to get because he was charismatic, and they felt like they could kind of rein him in despite the fact that they might not fully, like, they didn't fully agree with everything he was doing, but in the end, it didn't matter because what he said became law. So I feel like maybe this term might be a better one for us to use. And it's not me moving away from the term fascist to describe Donald J. Trump, because that term still applies perfectly. But I do think that we will be able to convince more people with this other term that is still very, very accurate to what's going on. And oh, I remember my point from earlier. There is a worry that because this term sounds like it's softer than fascism, that means that it is less powerful, but no, that's not the case. Anybody who is a good manipulator knows that just walking around and carrying the big stick and yelling all the time doesn't really do you a whole lot of favors. That is temporary power at best until enough people decide that you don't need to have that power anymore. But if you speak softly and carry a big stick instead, then you'll probably have a lot more success. And that's kind of what's going on with the United States. Again, not with Donald Trump. Donald Trump talks like a fucking fascist. But the United States as an apparatus, insofar as it can utter any words, is very much operating like that illiberal democracy. We have our elections. We have our votes. The people have their power, but it doesn't really matter in the way that you might want. And that's frustrating. Now, granted, that does not mean that illiberal democracy is weaker, because it is as insidious as it is as a concept. There are more people that can be okay with it for longer. There are people who, again, are going to see this as just the metamorphization of our current democracy, and that is what worries me. So, here's where we talk about what we can do about this, as with everything else. There is only so much power in the United States. There's a finite amount of it that can be used to hurt you, me, and all of your friends. That power can be eroded from underneath. If enough of the local institutions do not play along with the Congress, then we can actually start doing a tug of war with various areas of the country, with various areas of power. This is one of the reasons why the DSA tries to fight as hard as it does to get local people elected at the local level instead of at the state or Congress level. You get somebody in Congress, and then, yes, you've managed to get somebody who's going to be one vote of many, and that is very, very powerful. Those votes have a lot of weight. But if you get somebody on like a local labor council, they can actually do a lot of things that change the lives of the people around them very quickly and very effectively. And if you do that to scale, then the real lives of people can be benefited in such a way that, quite honestly, aside from taxes, we can just kind of say fuck the federal government at that point and just have a bunch of laws at state level that say that no, we're able to operate the way that we are, right? Supreme Court says that Roe v. Wade doesn't exist anymore, but you manage to get enough power at the local level to actually enshrine women's rights into laws at the state level, then suddenly you have a lot more power. Now, granted, I wish that this wasn't how we had to go about this, because this is basically taking the Republican concept of, oh no, states' rights. This is taking that concept and it is trying to wield that as a weapon against them. But it is one of the few weapons they've allowed us to use still, so we may as well use it to the best of our ability. And like any weapon, it works best when you hone it. And one of the weapons you should be honing is not just getting people elected and canvassing and doing all the fun stuff you might be able to do with the DSA, it's also your language, and that gets us back to illiberal democracy. If you're trying to convince somebody to help you out with trying to get a particular politician elected, if you are talking about fascism, you might not be able to lead as many people to your cause. Talk about a liberal democracy, they might listen a little more. They might, at the very least, ask you the question, what is that? Because everybody kind of already thinks they know what a fascist is, despite the fact that that word has a whole lot of baggage and a whole lot of meaning, and quite literally has essays written trying to define what it is and what it isn't. This other term does not have that same baggage. Now, I am not the one who made this term. I am not the one who first started arguing for this term. In fact, there's plenty of information about this term dating back several decades. But as of right now, I don't really hear that term used all that much. Naki Bree says, given your definition of what I've heard, it sounds like Russia's a liberal an illiberal democracy too. Sorry, not liberal democracy. Illiberal. Illiberal. I-L-I, not, or I-L-L-I. Yeah, like Putin is the only choice on the ballot. They're still voting. Exactly. So like when you're talking about an illiberal democracy, you can point to Russia. You can point to China. These are places that have elections, but you better elect a dear leader. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Now, here's the thing where the delineation needs to be made, because I am a proponent that the United States is largely controlled by a handful of oligarchs with their money and influence and ability to lobby. So what happens when Donald Trump's not in office? Well, then there's going to be another person in office that may actually be furthering all of the same agendas of the regime, just changing the veneer for it. And at that point, congratulations, you know that the illiberal democracy is doing exactly what it wanted to do, because you got a different guy elected. Things are better, aren't they? And then they just don't get that much better. We'll see how things pan out right now. I'm hoping that we still have free and fair elections and shit by the time 2028 comes around. But I also feel like because of how this term works, maybe we have been fighting an old war with old tactics. And there's a new one that's on the horizon that we need to be a little better prepared for. Naki Bree says, "Oh yeah, liberal sounds a lot like liberal." So like we are supposed to be a neoliberal capitalist democracy. Like that is what we are supposed to be, or a republic. That's what we are supposed to be. No, the term Naki was illiberal. And I feel like I've waxed lyrical about this enough, and I feel like there's going to be people in the comment section that get like mad at me for just kind of talking about this a ton. But regardless, I still feel the way that I do. Apparently, there is a book you can read on this that's from 1995. The book is literally called Towards Illiberal Democracy in Pacific Asia, but I have not read that book personally. That is one that's going to have to be on my reading list here, because this term is new to me. I actually had not heard this term used that much until today, and I thought it was interesting enough that I wanted to throw it at you. Sarah Chikorita says, "I still think I like pseudo-democracy." Yeah, and you know what? That is a neat term as well. This one has some historical weight behind it, though, and that's what I think I'm going to stick with because of that. So, yeah, TLDR, the term is illiberal democracy, not liberal democracy. The term describes something that looks like a democracy from the outside, but operates much more authoritarianly on the inside. It is a term that I think is rapidly approaching the point where it very, very easily describes the United States. And you can have a fascist in power without necessarily having a fascist country if the checks and balances of power are doing their thing. And you and I both know they're not in the United States right now. So there's the TLDR for people who fast forward to the end and get a TLDR at the end of a video. I don't know who you are, but I guess that works out. This was mostly a string of thought. I didn't do as much note-taking or anything for this as I might have for another video, so maybe this is going to be one of those that just kind of tanks in the algorithm, which will suck because the whole point of this video is to try to hand some utility to other people. So I don't know. I hope this video does well. If not, maybe I'll do a more structured video on it. We'll see. That said, thank you for watching, and insert end of video tagline here. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Sylvie Snow, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.